Welcome to Biologica. I'm Dr. Susan, a veterinarian and a marine educator from Maine. On this show, we'll be exploring the many ways that animals and humans interact and that society and nature intersect. Please visit my Patreon or my Podbean page to support the show or to suggest future episodes. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the episode today. Thanks for listening.
Sand in the sea, sea in the sand. Hear the wings in flight of the lovely dove. Summer nights, happy nights.
Today's episode is about a truly amazing and ancient creature, the horseshoe crab. Prepare to be amazed by horseshoe crabs, both their reproductive behavior, which is very cool and fascinating, and their importance to both people and the ecology and species of the seashore. We're going to talk to both an expert, Dr. Jane Brockmann, who studied horseshoe crabs for many years and still studies and writes about them today. We're also going to talk to a budding marine scientist, a 12-year-old student who's very interested in seashore creatures and fishing and has had some horseshoe crab experiences to share. In addition, we'll join an educational experience about horseshoe crabs at a local land trust event at a nature preserve. While it may not be colorful and in some eyes beautiful, it's quite important and has been around much longer than humans have.
On a day like today, we pass the time away, writing love letters in the sand. How you laughed when I cried.
Here's a short anecdote about a horseshoe crab that I recently encountered in the eastern shore of Maryland. We're at Assateague National Seashore vacationing and seeing the horses, but this morning on our morning swim at the coast here on this barrier island, we're on the Atlantic side of the island, we saw a really cool horseshoe crab, had a little horseshoe crab experience. We were swimming in the waves and we looked up on shore and there was a horseshoe crab on its back. We did learn this episode they can turn themselves over, but it was having a little trouble getting itself turned over. It was huge and it was kind of wavy. So I went up and turned it over and then we watched it for a bit. And the waves kept hitting it and it was trying to sort of crawl back to the water, but it looked like it was going to have some trouble with the waves. So we decided we might intervene and try and help it. So here's Kyle with some observations on what he thought about the horseshoe crab. I think it was our family's first time seeing a big live horseshoe crab on the beach.
Oh yeah, it was really big, and its shell or carapace was really thick, and it seemed really old. It was cool, and when you flipped it over, it was really surprising. All the little claw legs.
Yeah. So we lifted it up and turned it over and held it kind of carefully. It was really heavy. Like it was, I don't know. It was like a hefty horseshoe crab. I think it may have been a female, although mid-range we did learn that they're bigger. And then I was going to swim it out, and Kyle at first was thinking maybe not, but then you changed your mind. Do you want to say what you were thinking? You decided that it would not hurt you or bite or anything?
I didn't want you to get hurt trying to carry it far out, so I decided to do it for you, even though I was a little nervous.
That's very chivalrous of you. Thank you. Next, we're going to speak with our interviewee today. I'm here with Dr. Jane Brockmann. She's a professor emeritus in biology with a specialty in animal behavior at University of Florida. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Brockmann. One thing I wondered generally is how you first got interested in studying behavior and also horseshoe crabs in particular.
Yes, well, I've been interested in behavior since the early days. I was a high school bird watcher, and that's really what interested me the most about birds. I mean, just some of my earliest memories are we lived along the river, and some of my earliest memories are of birds, like birds, the big heron feeding, or and then I decided in high school that I would study animal behavior. I read a couple of books by Nico Turnbergen, one on called Curious Naturalists, and I just thought they were so fascinating, all the things that he had done studying little wasps and studying birds and so forth. And so actually my high school yearbook says that I'm going to college. I knew I was going to Tufts University and study animal behavior and get a PhD. So it's something I wanted to do forever.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that you had that passion and really stuck with your plan. And just a side note that I went to Tufts Veterinary School. So we
Really?
share that history. Yes.
Oh, great.
It's a great school.
It is, yes.
And how about horseshoe crabs? How did you get interested in their behavior?
Okay, so I was working on something very different. I did my I did my master's degree on a little fish called the Beau Gregory and its territorial behavior. I did that in the Florida Keys. And then I did a PhD studying a lovely big wasp called the great golden digger wasp. It's a wasp. It's a solitary wasp that digs burrows in the ground, and it catches katydids and meadow crickets and things like that to feed its offspring. And then my next project was on mud daubers, which feed their offspring spiders.
Oh, wow.
You know, the pipe organ mud daubing wasp. So they were all arthropods, but they were very different groups of animals. But when I came to the University of Florida, I was teaching animal behavior, and I wanted to have a project that all the students in the class could do together, and then we would analyze the data together and, collect enough data to actually have a research project. And so the University of Florida has a field station 3 miles from shore on the west coast of Florida, on the Gulf Coast of Florida. And it seemed like a very good idea to take my students out there. They actually become biologists. Biology students become biologists when you take them away from campus, sororities and fraternities and such. And so horseshoe crabs come to the beach at a very predictable time. So I could actually schedule the class to be, on the new moon or the full moon in March and be pretty sure that there would be at least some of them there. And so that's how it got started. And then usually there were some there, and my teaching assistants and I were able to collect quite a bit of data over the next few years. We saved what the students collected and analyzed it every year. And I kind of long in the late 80s and late 80s, early 90s, I wanted to change subjects. I was sort of done everything I could do with the mud daubers at the moment. And so I started analyzing, going back to the data we had collected, and wrote a grant based on the data my undergraduate students had collected. Got my grant, and off I went studying horseshoe crabs. And I continued to study them. Well, I have still sort of finishing up on projects.
Well, I love that story. I love that the research was born out of being a teacher wanting to do hands-on and real work with students. I am a big fan of hands-on sort of real life education. And I know my own experience studying biology in college, the memories I have that were most influential were the ones where we went out in the field and did real things. So I love that it sort of came from that origin.
Yeah, and it's very true. And years later, people here in Gainesville who did their undergraduates at UF who took my animal behavior course, for example. Now they're the senior medical doctor somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Will come back and say to me, "Oh, I just love going out to see or ski out to this little field station that we had." So
That's really great.
it is really an unforgettable experience to be able to do field work, and unfortunately, it's pretty much disappearing. But such a fantastic thing to do.
Yes, I very much agree with that. What about sort of delving into horseshoe crabs themselves a bit more? For people, I have listeners that like animals and are interested in nature and animal behavior, but they may not know about horseshoe crabs. And what about their behavior or their ecology or other things make them interesting or important to the ecology or to people? Or why should sort of the listeners care about horseshoe crabs?
Oh, there are so many reasons. Yeah, it's really nice actually to be studying an animal that people care about. They didn't really care that much about solitary digging wasps,
Mm-hmm.
but horseshoe crabs are very different. There's lots of issues. First of all, I think they're really fascinating, really cool animals. They are not like anything else on the planet. They are a very old lineage. They're arthropods. So they're in that huge group that includes all the crustaceans, all the insects, all the spiders and mites and centipedes, all those things are arthropods. So they are arthropods, but other than that, they're pretty much in their own, well, they are in their own little group. And they're most closely related to spiders, but they've been separated from spiders, since the Paleozoic. So they're a very old lineage. There's a very ancient fossil record of horseshoe crabs. They go back, I don't know, 450 million years. There's things in the fossils that are clearly horseshoe crabs, on the lineage with horseshoe crabs. And the Jurassic horseshoe crabs look almost exactly like present day ones. So
Wow.
they're a very conservative, they're species that are a group that really hasn't changed very much. In terms of other things that make them very interesting to people is, well, they are a very important part of the ecology, particularly of northern East Coast, like the Delaware Bay area. They are a source of food. They come to the Delaware Bay in enormous numbers, and they come to breed on the beaches. And they come in such numbers that so the female comes in, she lays her eggs on the beach, and not on the beach, she lays her eggs in the beach. She buries herself down in the beach, a few inches, 4 or 5 inches, and lays her eggs down there. And by the way, their reproduction is not like anything else that exists today. The female lays her eggs externally, and the male fertilizes them externally underneath her. All the rest of them animals, all the rest of the arthropods are behaving quite differently. They mostly have internal fertilization, or if it's external, it's really completed on the body of the animal. But this is externally in the water underneath, in the sandy water mix underneath the female. Our eggs and sperm are all mixed together. So that kind of external fertilization is very odd, very peculiar, not like anything else. So they lay their eggs in the beach, and there are so many animals nesting in the beach that they accidentally or inadvertently dig up each other's eggs. And so those eggs then come up to the surface, the eggs of somebody who nested there before them.
Right.
And the eggs come up on the surface and are then a source of food for migrating shorebirds. And in fact, some of the shorebirds time their migrations to when horseshoe crabs are there.
Wow.
And so they really depend, like the red knot, for example, really depends, the large shorebird depends on horseshoe crab eggs being there when they're migrating, as they migrate. And they're one of these species that migrates from all the way from the very most southern tip of South America up to very northern Canada. So they really need a a stop that really fills them up with lots of good food for the rest of the journey. So there's, they're just intrinsically interesting creatures because they're so ancient and not like anything else. Oh, another feature that's not like anything else is that their mouth is on the underside between their legs.
Oh.
And this was true of some very ancient Paleozoic arthropods, but there's no other arthropod. If you think about all the spiders and crustacean, all of those animals have their mouth up in the front of their body, but these have the mouth is between the legs underneath, and so it's strange thing. It's not like any other animal around. So they're very interesting animals in lots of ways. They're very important ecologically as food for other animals. Here in Florida, the alligators feed on them in large numbers. Other things, the loggerhead turtles feed on them.
Oh.
They were a very important source of food. When there used to be loggerhead turtles in Chesapeake Bay, there were a lot of them were feeding on horseshoe crabs. So ecologically, it's sort of intrinsically interesting, ecologically very important. And of course, there are a lot of human uses of horseshoe crabs. The most important of which is that they are used for a very important medical test. So anything that enters the human body, any vaccine, IV fluid, heart valves, new knees, anything that goes in the human body has to be tested to make sure that it was manufactured in a clean environment. And the test for that is called the LAL test. And the LAL test, it stands for Limulus amoebocyte lysate. And the Limulus is the scientific name for the North American horseshoe crab. And the amoebocytes are just their blood cells. And the lysate it's a word that means breaking open a cell. So literally all it is the blood is collected. It's collected by several different companies, 5 different companies along the coast. Its blood is removed from the horseshoe crab, and the horseshoe crab is put back. It doesn't kill them. They're put back, and the blood is then spun down and, in a centrifuge, and the cells are broken open, lysed, and that's the LAL test right there.
Wow.
Nothing but spun down horseshoe crab blood.
Wow.
And it is incredibly sensitive to the presence of gram-negative bacteria, which is the bacteria that's in water and so forth. And it was developed in the 80s, and it has become the standard for anything that enters the human or animal body. I mean, it's also used in veterinary practice.
Wow. That's
so
amazing.
It's a really important. And people, I don't know. There is another material. They have cloned the genes for making this enzyme, this protein in there that has this property. It coagulates. It's a protein that coagulates around gram-negative bacteria, around actually not just the bacteria, but around the little coats that come from the bacteria. So even if there's no live bacteria present, if there have been bacteria in the manufacturing, it will detect that as well.
Wow.
So it's extremely sensitive, and it coagulates around that material. Yeah, so it's a really important, so that they have cloned the gene that makes this material, and they have made the material, and by cloning that gene into yeast, so they can make it, but it has not yet been accepted by the Pharmacopoeia, the organization that says what drugs should be used for what purposes, how things should be tested. So it probably will be accepted in the future. I think it is being used. Computer chips and so forth have become so small that they too need to be tested for the presence of bacteria. They need to be manufactured in a clean environment.
Wow.
And so they also are LAL is being used to test all kinds of electronic equipment as well. And I think that new factor C material is being used for that, but it hasn't yet been accepted for human use.
Wow.
It's very hard on the horseshoe crabs to lose about a third or a half of their blood, but they are put back. And the data that is used says that there's about 15% mortality. There's also some other effects on their behavior, and they're less active and so forth, as you might expect. So I'm sure it has effects on reproduction and so forth, but it's a little hard to get at. Measure live animals, but it doesn't kill them, but they do take the companies that are bleeding horseshoe crabs do take a very large number along the East Coast. It's also, there are 3 species of Asian horseshoe crabs. They are all of them much rarer than ours. They're much more species of concern or somewhat endangered, but they too are being used to make TAL, Tachycleus, that's the scientific name of the Asian species. So a lot of us are hopeful that at least it would be accepted or used. This artificial one, the cloned one, would LAL would be used. Instead of the TAL.
To take a little pressure off the horseshoe crab populations. And that's so interesting. I've always thought they were fascinating creatures, and I'll see them sometimes around certain moon cycles on the coast near us, but I didn't know about their ecological importance and also the human uses. And it sounds like, there's a lot of importance to their population sort of health. And I was going to ask this later, but because of the things we just learned about, could you speak to how they're doing? It sounds like the Asian ones are more rare. How are the populations in the East Coast of the U.S. and down in Florida area doing?
They're protected all along the East Coast, the Atlantic coast, at least to some degree. They are, in other words, there is management of horseshoe crabs by the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. They are, my little dog is...
That's okay. I've been there too. I've got some hanging around in the house. They sometimes chime in.
He's making this very odd. Yeah, well, anyway, he has a toy that makes a very strange sound, and it's a little distracting. I'm sorry. So, how are the horseshoe crabs doing? Okay, yes. So they are being protected by the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries. They are being managed by the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, and there are different regulations in different states. But all the states, to some degree at least, are regulating the numbers of horseshoe crabs. But the one use that I haven't mentioned is that they are used for bait. The horseshoe crabs are collected and frozen and then used as bait for eels. That's a very long-standing use of horseshoe crabs. It's a fairly small bait industry, but there are some all along the coast. Some people use horseshoe crabs as bait for eels, and then they are also used as bait for what's called the conch industry. It's a harvest of whelks, of knobby and smooth whelks, and it's quite a big harvest in the mid-Atlantic states. And there's a lot of horseshoe crabs that are collected as a result of the bait harvest. And that bait harvest back in the late 90s got to be so heavy in the mid-Atlantic states that the number of horseshoe crabs really did decline. They declined rather seriously. And so that's when the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission started managing them all along the coast. And they've been managed particularly in Delaware Bay and New Jersey and Delaware, Maryland. And the numbers have come back a lot from from that period when they were being over harvested. And so there's now a lot of horseshoe crabs in Delaware Bay. On the New Jersey side, they're not taken at all. There is a harvest of them for the bait harvest on the Delaware side, but they don't do it until after June, the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd of June, when most of the birds have already left. And so they are managing the horseshoe crabs for the birds, which is kind of an interesting.
Yeah.
And so that region, I think, is doing reasonably well. There's a lot of eggs. There's a lot of. The birds are still down. The numbers of birds are down. Particularly the red knot is not doing very well, but it's not really quite clear what the cause of that is. We don't want it to be caused by a lack of eggs in the Delaware Bay, but there's a lot of horseshoe crabs in the Delaware Bay. But there are other places where there aren't so many. Probably the southeast is probably relatively stable population. This is running from North Carolina south to North Florida. There's a population that runs around in New York and around Long Island and in the Long Island Sound, Connecticut. And that one appears to be much lower. But certainly the New York population is lower for reasons that are not quite clear. They are being managed, but the numbers are down from earlier. And because the numbers are being evaluated all along the coast on a regular basis. And so but on the numbers all the way up to Cape Cod, the numbers are all down all along that area. As far as I know, the numbers have always been fairly low in New Hampshire and Maine. But as far as I know, the numbers are thought to be reasonably stable, but at low numbers. So any time that a population is at low numbers, it's always vulnerable to changes in the environment, changes in the human development, along the coast. It's vulnerable to the presence of hardening devices, with sea level rise. People are putting in riprap and various kinds of hardening, of shorelines.
I've seen that
so forth.
A lot in the coastal area where I live, that people are getting kind of panicked about some big storms that have happened and starting to build up walls and rocky shore, add rocks to the shores and that sort of thing.
That riprap stuff is terrible for horseshoe crabs. The walls remove their nesting space because there's no beach anymore. But the riprap, they actually get thrown up into those rocks, and it's usually like cinder blocks or something that have just been thrown along the shore, and they get really trapped in those things. I mean, that's really particularly bad for them. So some kinds of living shorelines, other kinds of shorelines that are actually designed instead of just thrown up there are much preferable. So that's I've covered everything except Florida. In Florida, we really have very little information about the population levels. But as far as we know, well, we know that, so there's a North Florida population that goes down to about Daytona Beach area. And those are the southeast population. They are very large horseshoe crabs, and they're genetically the same as those that are in Georgia. However, in the Indian River, which is a waterway, a lagoon that runs all along the coast, the east coast of Florida, there's a lot of horseshoe crabs in that lagoon area. called Indian River, but there's it's rivers and lakes and so forth inside of the islands that are there. And there's a lot of horseshoe crabs in there, but they're very small. They're a genetically distinct population, different from the northern ones, different from those that are further south. And then the Gulf Coast of Florida has a couple of unique populations, genetically distinct populations. There's a southern one and a more northern one. But we know almost nothing, I would say, about what those population levels are like, whether they're doing well or poorly. The data that we collected suggested that they rose a bit in the 90s, but then now are back down again. So it's really, there's not enough data being taken to evaluate that.
Well, thank you so much for talking about their conservation and their population status. And I think in there was a little bit also about how people designing shorelines can possibly be mindful of this. My last question is how, going back to your specialty in behavior, what are some special features or interesting things about the horseshoe crab nesting behavior that might surprise people or that are unique to the horseshoe crab? Maybe that is true. Maybe a couple highlights. Yeah, I'm sure. Exactly.
Well, when we first started studying horseshoe crabs, of course, we were very interested in their reproductive behavior because that's what they're doing on the shoreline. They're coming up they come on new and full moon high tides, but that's because the tide is so high. They really are looking for finding a place that's high on the beach where their eggs will develop well. If the eggs are too low, they develop slowly. If they're too high, they dry out. So there's this special area on the beach and sometimes in other locations as well where they have very good development of their eggs. So we started studying them, just whatever we could see that was on the beach because very little was known about them. And we noticed that females would come to the beach with a male attached to them. And that was well known at the time. But there are other males that come into the beach that don't have any female. They just come in and gather around the spawning pairs. So a pair that comes up on the beach, the female will lay her eggs and the male will fertilize them, as I described earlier. But there are these other guys hanging out around these spawning pairs.
Interesting.
And so we figured that what was going on was that these extra males, what we call satellite males, were fertilizing eggs underneath the female as well. And so we did paternity analysis. We collected a tissue sample from all the putative fathers that were there and the mother and the attached male. And indeed, the satellite males, those that are collected around the female and the male, are fertilizing a lot of eggs.
Oh, wow.
In some cases, more eggs than the attached male is.
Wow.
And in fact, they all get it. You'll sometimes see a pair with maybe 3 or 4 males all around them. And all of those males might get fertilization. So,
wow. Some of them are kind of sneaking in there.
Yes, what they're doing, there's a small hole that's along the line, or in the middle of the horseshoe crab. They can bend. There's a kind of hinge in the middle of the horseshoe crab, and to either side of that hinge, there's a little bit of a hole, and that's the breathing channel that the female uses. She circulates water down that hole and across her gills, and that allows her to breathe. Well, what these males are doing, these satellite males are doing, is sitting over that in-current canal and literally dumping sperm down underneath the female while she is laying her eggs and while the attached male is ejaculating sperm. And so it's just a big mixture under there, and those satellites fertilize a lot of eggs.
That's so
And
interesting.
so we were very interested in that aspect of it. We refer to those in animal behavior as alternative strategies. So some males come in with a female that they have paired up with offshore, and some males come to the beach without a female. They never even, they don't look for females out there. They just come ashore.
Wow.
And when you see that, you see alternative strategies occur in a number of other species. And when you see alternative strategy, alternative ways for males to get matings, it's usually that the larger males are, pushing the smaller ones out of the way, or fighting with them, or in some way dominating them. And so one of my early projects with my undergraduates on the beach was to measure the size of attached and satellite males, because I assumed that the attached males would be bigger and, will have muscled the other guys out of the way. But that wasn't true at all. There is no difference in size between attached and satellite males. And so that was a big surprise to me. And so one of my students actually noticed that they look different. The attached and satellite males look different. And as it turns out, after having investigated this for a while, the attached males are on average younger than the satellite males.
Wow.
Yeah, bit of a surprise. Usually it's larger, older males, but horseshoe crabs are a little different in this respect because they have a terminal molt. A lot of our crustaceans will continue to molt and get larger and larger and larger, even though they're adult, they're reproducing, but they still grow bigger. But that's not true of horseshoe crabs. Horseshoe crabs grow to a certain size, and then they begin to reproduce, and they never grow bigger after that.
Interesting.
So what we're detecting as age is the aging of the shell that occurs after their last molt. So they continue to get older, continue to age as they continue to live after their last molt. And they can live 7 or 8 years, and they gradually, if you go out there now, you will see some of the males are very dark and have pitted shells and things growing all over them, and others are absolutely clean. They're slimy with a little bit of mucus-like material, and those are the ones that have just recently molted, and those are the ones that are more likely to be attached.
That's so fascinating that they differ by age in that, and also kind of fun that our listeners could potentially go scour the shore at the high tides of the full and new moon and kind of, if they find horseshoe crabs, maybe make a guess for their age based on their shell color and kind of how rugged it looks.
Right? Yeah, we define them as young, medium, and old. And yeah, you can easily do that with looking, particularly the young ones are very clear. They're lighter color, they're shiny.
That's so cool. Well, this has been so interesting. Is there anything you wanted to share that I didn't ask you about? I feel like I learned so many things.
Well, one of the little things is that the horseshoe crabs are not paying so much attention to the moon, they're paying attention to the tides. And so what they really are coming to the beach for are these extra high tides. And those, of course, occur from a couple days before to a few days after a new or full moon. But if there's an onshore wind or, something is disrupting the tides, you can, in one way or another, you can sometimes get them breeding if we've had a onshore wind for a long time, or in the tides are high, or if tides offshore, the tides are lower than expected, then even though they were predicted to be high, there won't be no horseshoe crabs there. And there are a few places, like the Indian River Lagoon, where there's no tide at all. And those animals breed entirely based on the wind direction.
Oh,
So they breed on one shore when the wind is from the east and the other shore when the wind is from the west.
wow.
And it doesn't get very high, but it goes up a foot or so, and that's enough to make a difference to them. And they breed at that on those times when the water is extra high.
That's kind of sophisticated. Like if you think about this as a creature that's, like you said, not changed a lot since really ancient times. It has a very sort of ancient design. It seems kind of sophisticated that a population is adapting their strategy to this regional variation in their sort of physical setup there with the Indian River.
Yes, I agree with you. And they're although they look exactly like Jurassic horseshoe crabs, underneath the hood, so to speak, they are adapting. They're adapting physiologically, like the ones in Maine, the horseshoe crabs in Maine, are active at much lower temperatures than the ones down here in Florida, which they don't move until it's, well up, up into the 70s or, 60s or so. So there are adaptations that occur, and they are genetically distinct. So there are these genetically distinct populations.
Interesting. Wow, that's so interesting. And this is fascinating, and there's so much more to them than I ever imagined. And thank you so, so much for sharing this really wonderful information about horseshoe crabs.
When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore. When the world seems to shine like you've had too much wine, that's amore.
Next, we're going to hear some live field recordings from a visit I had to a nature preserve where a local land trust was hosting a very popular horseshoe crab educational event. I'm here at the Chesapeake and Cumberland Land Trust event at the Broad Cove Reserve, which is a town beach in Cumberland, Maine, at a horseshoe crab educational event. It's filled up, all the spots filled up within minutes. It's a very popular event. There's a lot of families down here to meet and greet and learn about horseshoe crabs. And this is their mating season.
So these guys are superstars. They're actually rock stars of the ocean. And we're going to basically tell you a lot about them. There's a lot to be told about them.
We have a special permit that allows us to do education programs. So we are allowed to bring these things on shore, help you handle them, show them to you, and spread the word about how wonderful they are and that we need to do our parts to protect them. So when you're walking along and you see them, if you see one stranded, just tip it over so that it can go on its way.
So we're going to touch the big ones now. So
Yay! Wash it off some sand. If you notice, this hard shell is on the outside and it covers everything, including these large eyes right here. There's a protective covering over them. So it is okay to touch.
Whoa! What did you?
She was powerful. So she will try to use the tail. The tail is the important part to flip herself over.
Come on, you can do it. You can
I know. Let's see if she'll do it.
Come on. Look at
And she's gonna try. Come on, come on. If you ever see one stranded, we say just flip them, and you flip them over, and then they're protected, and then they can go on their way. These eyes in the front can see ultraviolet light. No way. So they can see really well under the light of the moon and the stars. So they will often be found coming up on the beaches at night. Same time.
That is impressive.
I know. But when they come out of the water, they have to hold their breath.
So they need to hold their breath a very long time right now.
They are holding their breath for a long time. How long do you think they can hold their breath?
Really long.
Days.
Really.
3 days.
wow.
So these are their legs.
That is a lot of legs.
It's a lot of legs. How many legs?
I don't know. It's so many.
How many? Anyone know?
10. 1,100.
Oh, I see two mating ones here in the
So
wild.
you see this one right here. These guys.
It's 2 there.
Yep, it's pair. And so the one in the front is the female, and she's digging down into the sand.
I don't know. I don't want to lift them back because they're scary.
They're scary.
And they lift it back. Scary? Oh.
I kind of like them.
Touching it.
Yeah.
These are the boys.
They're pretty.
Right over here.
Nice.
These are the moms.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
They're pretty.
The boys are right here. The moms are right there.
The moms are bigger, right?
Yeah, the moms are bigger. The boys are little.
Right.
And I have some clams that we can feed them. And I'll go get the clams. We'll see if she eats because it's kind of cool when it like it'll. Yeah, see it's starting to disappear in there.
That one's going down in. It's also flapping its gills.
Its stomach is inside the mouth there,
interesting.
so
Maybe
it'll go
when it's
down in
moving.
there.
So where's
It's going
the
down
poop?
into.
Where do they poop?
Oh, they poop right here out their mouth, like right by their tail.
Look
So
at
it
that.
goes.
It's almost
That's
gone.
the mouth.
Wow,
and
it's
it's going in,
disappearing.
gonna go into the stomach and all down.
We're feeding the large horseshoe crabs, and I'm coming back to look. There's some baby horseshoe crabs here on loan from a nature center for this educational event. And then there's a collection of horseshoe crab eggs. They look about the size of a mustard seed, if you've ever seen those. And they're sort of a mint green, beautiful color.
Why are you flipping over? I think he's flipping over. She is.
Oh, she's almost there.
She's almost got it.
No.
Loves it. Now this little piece of clam here.
Wow. She's
Deciding
hard
if
to lift.
you can help her. She might want to eat
What
it.
about this
right
one? Is
side
it
up.
going away?
Yeah, it's almost
It's almost all the way in?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I feel like you're not better.
You don't want to?
It's almost gone in now.
Is it almost gone?
Yeah, that's that one.
I'll just see.
Let's see how this one. This one too. Can I see it?
Okay, now looking out just on the shore here, protected nature preserve here in Cumberland. There's a male and female wild horseshoe crab. One pair right next to the educational event, which is kind of amazing. Now I'm going to walk along and see if I see any more. It's early June. It's the time of year where we see them, especially around full moons. Oh my God. I'm right next to a whole group of eider ducks, and there are tons of fuzzy babies, and it's really cute. I'm going to take a picture for, I'll post it on Instagram and Patreon. Oh my gosh, they're quite adorable. Now back to horseshoe crabs. I just had to get distracted there for a minute by these adorable fuzzy eider ducklings. Wow. Oh, I see another horseshoe crab here. This one is not paired. It may be a male, although I'm not certain. I see another pair of mating ones. Okay, I'm going to take a picture of this one too. This is a wild one. And then off in the distance is actually a pair of a male and female, with the male hanging on. So I've seen two mating pairs and one singleton. I'm kind of walking further around the shore. So the ones we were talking about earlier are in baby pools as part of an educational event with an organization called Coast Encounters and the Sheboygan Cumberland Land Trust. And then now I'm walking along the shore of Broad Cove Preserve, looking at the wild horseshoe crabs. That was really cool. I'm walking away from Broad Cove Preserve. It's high tide, and there's both an educational event with horseshoe crabs in the pools, and lots of children and adults and older seniors, a big mix of ages enjoying it. And then there's wild horseshoe crabs on the shore. Even though I used to study marine invertebrates, I learned a ton at the event today that was really fascinating, from not only their biology, but their historical importance, how Native Americans used to use them as bowls and tools and spear tips for fishing, and also how they've been so important for science, what they're used for there. So it was really fascinating. Thank you to both CCLT Land Trust and to the educators from Coast Encounters. A donation was made to the CCLT Land Trust on behalf of Biologica, the podcast. And if you'd like to learn more about their work and educational events and the land that they're preserving, their website, ccltmaine.org, will be on the Biologica episode notes. Also, the website from Coast Encounters will be there, and Coast Encounters can actually go out with families or small groups to do coastal explorations on the coast of Maine. Now we're going to hear from the student who is interested in marine science and has some stories or experiences with horseshoe crabs to share with us. I'm here with a family friend, and we're going to be chatting about horseshoe crabs. Can you introduce yourself and your name and age?
Hello, my name is Fritz. I'm 12 years old.
And Fritz, can you tell us about the experience you had going to see horseshoe crabs? I think they were breeding or along the seashore.
Yeah, so when I went to see the horseshoe crabs, a lot of them were breeding on top of each other in the water, and some of them were even on the shore.
And what did you notice about them? What was sort of interesting or surprising that you saw?
What really shocked me is how small the men were and how big the female were, and that it was happening so often, so fast. Like they would get together and then they would just leave.
Oh, interesting. And can you share with us something that I think you were telling me a story about when you were out fishing and there was a fish and a horseshoe crab. Can you share that story with the listeners?
Yeah, so recently I was out fishing and we saw this big striper, which is a striped bass, which is a type of fish in the area here, quite common, and it was 50 pounds and it had recently eaten a horseshoe crab that was about the size of 2 fists, and it had choked on it and it had gotten stuck in its airway, and then the fish had died, and we pulled it out from the water and it was huge, and then we realized that the horseshoe crab was actually still alive. So the spiny shell and the barb at the end of their tail actually saved the horseshoe crab from getting eaten, which was
amazing.
Really...
So you pulled it out of this giant fish's mouth and it was still alive?
Yeah, so it was pretty cool how we just saw it and then all of a sudden its legs started moving, which was pretty interesting.
That's amazing. And one of the things we talk about in this episode is how hardy they are, how they're this ancient, really hardy species. And that just kind of goes to show, like, it survived being eaten by a bass and then floating in a dead bass found by humans. And then did you guys release it?
We did end up releasing it. First, we took some pictures of it, maybe a few videos. Then we ended up releasing it. A bunch of people wanted to take it into our school for research, but we just had to release it.
It had been through a big adventure, so it was probably appreciative to get to go free. That's such a cool story. Last question, kind of a request. I met a couple kids in Maine who were very scared of horseshoe crabs and didn't want to go wade in the water or swim or anything if they thought they might be around. And I wondered if you could share any reassurances or thoughts from your experience with horseshoe crabs for kids out there that might think that they're scary.
Yeah, so horseshoe crabs aren't really the type of animals that would go on and want to spine you, but if you do step on them, they might get scared and they're probably just going to swim away. So it's very not likely that you would ever get spined by their big barb, and they're actually quite calm animals. So if you're calm, they're calm. They kind of match whatever energy you have.
Excellent. That's so cool. Well, thank you so much, and have fun fishing and seeing creatures out there.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you to Fritz for sharing those stories about horseshoe crabs. And best of wishes to him in his explorations of the East Coast and the marine science and fisheries there. Now we're going to hear from a couple studies about current research in horseshoe crabs. The first one is called Recovering the American Horseshoe Crab Through a Commitment to Collaboration by David Smith et al. From the journal Fisheries in 2025. The authors talk about how collaboration in different groups has really been a key to the success of recovery of horseshoe crabs in certain areas, and how in other areas where they haven't recovered as well, there's also a link to less collaboration with fisheries groups and conservation groups and others. They point out that, quote, mitigating the widespread threat of habitat loss from coastal development and sea level rise will really rely on continued collaboration of these diverse stakeholders. The next study is called The American Horseshoe Crab Limulus polyphemus Spawns Regularly in Salt Marshes, and this is by Sasson et al. The authors talk about how the horseshoe crab has often been considered quite a reproductive specialist, focusing on reproducing and laying eggs on beaches. But in their survey, they found that there were similar spawning and egg densities in both beaches and in salt marshes along the east coast of the U.S. So the results indicate that conserving and focusing on both beach habitat and salt marsh habitat is critical for protection of the horseshoe crab. Not only the horseshoe crab, but of course all the species that depend on their eggs, like the red knot and others. The final study we're going to highlight is from 2022 from Joseph Smith et al. And this is called The Horseshoe Crab Egg Availability for Shorebirds in Delaware Bay, Dramatic Reduction After Unregulated Horseshoe Crab Harvest and Limited Recovery After 20 Years of Management. The authors point out that in the Delaware Bay region, there's the largest group of spawning American horseshoe crabs, and this supports a huge diversity of shorebirds that feed on those eggs, including the migrating red knot that we've talked about and others. And they point out that in the 1990s, as unregulated harvest was associated with the decline of both horseshoe crab spawning and the horseshoe crab food supply for the birds, we saw a decline in shorebird populations at the same time. For example, they point out that red knot aerial survey counts have stabilized at 30% of the baseline original population, and ready turnstone counts are 40% of baseline estimates. So these are both shorebirds that are kind of sandpiper type birds that hop along or run along the seashore and eat horseshoe crab eggs while they're migrating. While the authors point out that horseshoe crab harvest management has stabilized the crab populations, that the recovery of the bird populations has been unfortunately limited. The authors point out that it's really important to continue to study and manage both bycatch, where they're accidentally caught with other fisheries, or where they're targeted specifically for pharmaceutical research, and also measurements and sort of monitoring of the egg prevalence and spawning prevalence of horseshoe crabs. Specifically, in this case, they're talking about because of their high importance for migrating shorebirds. While I won't go into them in detail, I'll also mention that there's been a number of studies in 2024 and 2025, more reviews and opinion papers, about how the alternatives to the bleeding program for the LAL study, both in terms of aquaculture and in terms of a synthetic LAL, are really critical and should be looked at closely by the medical and pharmaceutical companies, because they could be very important for both recovery of the horseshoe crab and a lot of shorebird populations. Finally, I'm going to include 2 short poems about horseshoe crabs. I was actually surprised, that's Couscous, my cat in the background, but You'll sometimes hear him in the background of one of several of our pets. So he just made a little visit and is helping us introduce the 2 poems for today, short poems that I found about horseshoe crabs on a website called Tiny Poetry. The first one is called Tidal Secrets. Crabs, ancient, steadfast, ebb and flow of moonlight, unraveling life in the deep blue, survivors. The second poem is titled Echoes of the Tide. Beneath the silver foam, a relic of time drifts in hues of jade and bronze. The horseshoe crab measures its ancient dance, its armor a whisper of creation's clumsy hands. In fragile waters where salt meets sorrow, this living fossil crawls across a bed of stories, a guardian of secrets from eons past. Its steps an echo of the primordial. Each shell a page, turned by the tides of change, and as the sun dips low, it carries the weight of life not just for itself, but for the tides to come. O fragile marvel, the world is brittle, but the depth of your journey holds the power of resilience, reminding the shore of everything it forgets. Don't let these waters emerge empty. I hope you enjoyed the episode about horseshoe crabs today, and that maybe you can keep an eye out and see if you find a horseshoe crab that you can help along its way. If you're interested in learning more, there'll be some links in the episode notes, and I will also post some pictures of horseshoe crabs from the educational event. I'll have those on both the Patreon page, which you can find by searching Dr. Susan on Patreon. I will also have them on the Biologica Instagram page. Thanks for joining us today. In 2 weeks, the next episode will be about the wild horses of Assateague Island. Thanks for joining us today, and keep discovering.
On a day like today, we pass the time away, writing love letters in the sand. How you laugh when I cry, each time I saw the tide take our love